Clara, come on. Let's not make this awkward, Vanessa whispered as she tugged Ethan gently away from me in the middle of the living room. I froze, the warmth from his small arms still lingering around my neck, and watched him reluctantly follow her to the other side of the room, his eyes glancing back at me with a flicker of guilt I tried not to notice. The scent of pine from the Christmas tree mixed with the soft hum of holiday music filled the house, the lights twinkling on the ornaments I had spent hours carefully hanging, each one a memory of years past. Plates of sugar cookies and small bowls of cocoa dusted with cinnamon sat on the kitchen counter, untouched, waiting for the laughter and chatter that should have filled this room. I could feel the cold nip of December seeping through the window panes. Yet inside the house, every detail was warm and bright, except for the sudden emptiness created by the absence of the connection I had hoped for with my family. I took a deep breath and ran my fingers over the edge of the table, the polished oak smooth under my skin, and let my eyes drift over the stockings lined up perfectly on the mantel, each bearing a name in neat script. Vanessa smiled at me in a way that was just slightly too bright, her hand resting lightly on Ethan's shoulder as though to claim him, to redirect the affection he had instinctively offered me. I reminded myself of the hours I had spent baking the gingerbread men just the way Ethan liked, rolling the dough carefully, pressing the tiny candy eyes, arranging them on the tray with precision, imagining him coming down the stairs and reaching for one, his little grin lighting up the room. Instead, he had been pulled aside, whispered to in a tone I couldn't hear, yet knew was meant to confuse or shame him for showing warmth to me. I felt a tight knot in my chest but refused to let it show, my hands folding neatly in my lap as I straightened my posture, pretending to adjust the napkin in front of me. I could hear Vanessa speaking softly to Ethan, her words unintelligible, yet the cadence was deliberate, as if she were teaching him a subtle lesson about whose side he should take. The warmth of the holiday lights seemed to mock the chill that had settled over my heart, a dissonance between the season's joy and the sting of exclusion. I reminded myself that Clara Bennett had always been calm, had always maintained her composure, and I would not let a fleeting act of pettiness disrupt decades of love and care I had poured into this family. I watched from across the room as Ethan's tiny hand lingered for a moment in Vanessa's, a silent plea for guidance, and I felt a wave of quiet determination wash over me. I would observe, I would remember, I would wait, but I would not be diminished by this small but cutting act. The clock ticked softly in the background, ornaments glinting like frozen stars, and I imagined the years of Christmases gone by, the laughter, the unwrapping of carefully chosen gifts, the cookies eaten warm from the oven. This was meant to be another of those days, and yet the shift was undeniable, Vanessa's presence a shadow over the simple joy I had anticipated. I leaned back in my chair, letting the soft cushion embrace me, noting the way Ethan's gaze flicked back toward me despite Vanessa's guiding hand, the silent communication of affection that could not be entirely suppressed. I sipped the hot cocoa I had poured moments ago, the chocolate thick and rich, and felt the bitter sweetness of the moment, the realization that control had been asserted in a subtle, deliberate way. The lights reflected off the polished ornaments, glittering, catching my attention, and I reminded myself that while this small act might seem inconsequential to others, it revealed much about intention and character. I adjusted the cookies on the tray, aligning them with exact spacing, an unconscious act of order in the face of the disorder of human behavior around me. Clara Bennett remained composed, a quiet observer of her own family, and as the carols played softly, I resolved to note every detail, every glance, every whisper, every movement, storing them carefully in memory, for these moments, though small, would speak volumes in the days to come. My heart felt the pang of exclusion, yet my face remained serene, a mask of patience and strength, a signal to myself and the universe that Clara would not be hastily diminished, that her care and devotion could not be undone by whispers and quiet redirection, that this holiday, like so many before, would be cataloged in my mind as a lesson in observation and fortitude, and the smallest gestures would not escape the notice of a woman who had spent decades nurturing the bonds that now appeared fragile but would, in time, reveal the true nature of those around her. The morning after the tense holiday gathering, Clara Bennett moved quietly through her home, the soft light from the frost-covered windows casting a pale glow across the living room. She straightened the ornaments on the tree once again, noticing the slight tilt of one shiny red ball and adjusting it with careful precision, her movements deliberate and unhurried. The scent of pine still lingered in the air, mingling with the warm aroma of spiced coffee she had brewed for herself. She poured a cup into her favorite ceramic mug, the one with a chipped handle that had been in the family for years, and carried it to the kitchen table, seating herself so that she could observe the house from the central point of view, as if surveying her domain. Clara took a slow sip, the warmth of the beverage spreading through her hands, and allowed herself a moment to think back over the past few days, replaying the events of Christmas in meticulous detail. She recalled Ethan's small, earnest smile as he approached her, the way his tiny hands had reached out instinctively for comfort and affection, and the subtle shift in his demeanor when Vanessa stepped in to redirect him. Clara noted the way Vanessa had spoken, soft but insistent, guiding her son in a manner that suggested control rather than warmth, and she felt the faint stirrings of an understanding that these behaviors were not random, not a simple reflection of circumstance, but rather a pattern carefully orchestrated over time. She looked around the kitchen, noting the untouched plate of cookies, the neatly stacked napkins, the cups lined precisely in a row, and saw in these details a reflection of the effort and care she had always invested in family rituals, contrasted sharply with the quiet neglect and manipulation she had witnessed. Clara allowed her mind to drift to other holidays, other celebrations, recalling birthdays, Thanksgiving dinners, and simple weekday meals, where she had given her time, energy, and love without complaint, only to see subtle slights or exclusions that, at the time, she had dismissed as oversight. Now, in the clarity of the morning light, these moments aligned to form a mosaic of intention and indifference, each slight gesture and carefully worded phrase becoming a piece of a larger picture that she had been too polite or too trusting to notice before. She sipped her coffee again, her blue eyes narrowing slightly as she considered the implications, feeling a quiet resolve form within her, a steady flame of determination that was neither reactive nor impulsive, but deliberate and observant. Clara understood that patience would be her ally. She would continue to observe, to take note, and to measure every action and word with careful attention, all while maintaining the composure and dignity that had been her shield through years of navigating family complexities. The light from the windows shifted subtly as the sun rose higher, casting elongated shadows across the hardwood floors, and Clara Bennett, alone yet not defeated, made a silent promise to herself that she would turn these moments of subtle betrayal into lessons of clarity and strategy, using observation and quiet intelligence rather than anger or confrontation, knowing that the depth of her awareness and the calm precision of her actions would ultimately allow her to navigate the dynamics of her family with insight and patience. Clara Bennett moved through the quiet rooms of her home, noting the gentle flicker of candlelight reflecting on the polished hardwood floors and the subtle shimmer of tinsel on the mantel. Each ornament seemed to hold a memory, a trace of laughter and warmth from holidays long past, and yet now the house felt unusually still, as if the air itself were aware of the tension she had sensed the previous day. She walked slowly to the kitchen, rearranging the plates and mugs left from her morning coffee, the act comforting in its simplicity and rhythm. Her mind wandered to Ethan, to the way he had hesitated for a moment as Vanessa guided him away, the innocence in his eyes mixed with the confusion of what he should do. Clara recognized the quiet power of observation, how every glance, every subtle movement revealed more than words ever could. She remembered past gatherings where laughter had filled the halls and the aroma of roasted turkey and cinnamon cookies had mingled freely with cheerful voices. Yet even then, small undercurrents of manipulation had existed, often unnoticed, quietly shaping the behaviors of those around her. Clara traced her fingers over the edge of the dining table, feeling the smoothness of the wood under her skin, and imagined the sequence of events as a series of patterns, gestures that redirected attention, whispers that influenced choices, and moments of exclusion that appeared innocuous to anyone not paying close attention. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the distant chime of the clock, the rustle of wrapping paper from last year's gifts all combined to create a canvas upon which she could reconstruct the subtle dynamics of her family interactions. She considered the deliberate nature of Vanessa's actions, how control had been asserted without force, through the careful management of perception and the quiet shaping of Ethan's responses. Clara sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth steady her thoughts, and allowed herself a moment to catalog the patterns she had observed. The timing of certain comments, the placement of seating, the way voices rose or softened, and the seemingly minor adjustments that carried underlying significance. The act of documenting these details in her mind brought a sense of clarity, a quiet assurance that while she would not react impulsively, she would not remain unaware or powerless. Clara looked out the window at the snow gently covering the yard, each flake unique yet part of a larger pattern, and reflected on her own consistency and presence within the household, how her dedication to family traditions and careful planning had always been a constant in an environment often marked by fleeting attention and self-interest. She allowed herself a small smile, not from triumph, but from the recognition that awareness itself was a form of strength, a quiet weapon against subtle injustices and manipulation. As the morning light strengthened, illuminating the familiar shapes of the furniture and the decorations she had so lovingly arranged, Clara Bennett felt a sense of composed determination settle over her, a recognition that the hours, the observations, and the careful attention to nuance would equip her to navigate the unfolding dynamics with both patience and insight, ensuring that her presence and influence remained intact, regardless of the undercurrents of control or exclusion she had witnessed. Clara Bennett settled into her favorite armchair, the cushions worn yet comforting beneath her, and let her gaze drift over the familiar details of the room. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting a warm glow that mingled with the golden light reflecting off the ornaments she had carefully hung on the Christmas tree. She remembered the small handprints Ethan had left on the window pane, the delicate smudges a testament to his curiosity and trust, now tinged with the complexity of his mother's subtle influence. Clara reached for the small journal she kept tucked beside the chair, its pages filled with observations, notes about family gatherings, and quiet reflections on past interactions, and she began to record the moments from the previous day in detail, noting the precise timing, gestures, and expressions she had witnessed. She thought back to the careful placement of the table settings, the aroma of fresh-baked cookies, and the way she had poured cocoa into the mugs with a gentle hand. All acts meant to convey warmth and care, yet the intended connections had been redirected, measured, and controlled by others. Clara observed how patterns emerged in the family dynamics, the repeated small acts of control, the strategic interruptions, the subtle guidance of Ethan's behavior by Vanessa, and she acknowledged the quiet power inherent in noticing these details. She allowed herself to recall the laughter and chatter of past holidays, the moments when conversations flowed freely, when shared memories were celebrated, and contrasted them with the selective warmth and interruptions of the present day, the absence of spontaneous affection revealing underlying intentions. Clara sipped the cocoa slowly, the warmth traveling through her hands and into her chest, steadying her thoughts as she contemplated the nature of influence and perception within her household. She recognized the importance of patience, of observing without immediate reaction, of noting every nuance while maintaining composure. The room was silent except for the crackling fire and the soft hum of the heating system, a calm backdrop against which her awareness sharpened. She noted the alignment of ornaments, the subtle glow of lights, the undisturbed plates on the counter, and understood that order and care in her environment mirrored the clarity she sought in her understanding of the family's social fabric. Clara reflected on the past, on the careful nurturing of family traditions and bonds, recognizing that while some efforts had been unnoticed or misinterpreted, the accumulation of attentive observation over the years provided her with insight into intentions and character. She allowed the rhythm of her own breathing to anchor her focus, each inhale a quiet preparation, each exhale a reminder of her calm authority and presence. Clara Bennett, immersed in these reflections, felt a growing certainty that the careful documentation of behaviors, the attentive observation of gestures, and the mindful awareness of interpersonal dynamics would equip her to navigate future gatherings with confidence, ensuring that her influence and understanding remained intact, while allowing her to act with measured wisdom rather than impulsive emotion. Clara Bennett sat quietly at the edge of the sofa, the afternoon light streaming through the frost-kissed windows and illuminating the soft beige upholstery with a gentle glow. The holiday decorations, carefully arranged on the mantel and around the room, shimmered subtly, casting reflections that danced across the walls, and each light seemed to mark a memory, a fragment of years spent celebrating family traditions. With warmth and care, she took a slow sip of the tea she had poured moments earlier, the steam curling upward and carrying with it the faint scent of cinnamon and cloves from the spiced candle burning nearby. Her gaze lingered on the small wooden table where Ethan had left his mittens and scarf, the tiny items serving as a reminder of the innocence and trust that had been momentarily disrupted by Vanessa's subtle intervention. Clara's mind traced the details of the previous day, noting not just the overt gestures but the hidden nuances, the timing of glances, the placement of seating, the soft inflections in Vanessa's voice when speaking to Ethan, each element a calculated component of influence that she now understood more clearly. She recalled the careful way she had set the table, the polished silverware aligned meticulously, the bowls of cookies arranged with thoughtful symmetry, and how those acts of care had been met with diversion rather than acknowledgement, a quiet redirection of attention that highlighted both the affection she offered and the manipulation she observed. Clara leaned back, allowing herself to consider the broader patterns of these interactions, the ways in which subtle cues and controlled moments had long guided family behaviors, often unnoticed but deeply impactful. She thought about the years of preparation for holidays and gatherings, the care taken to select ornaments, wrap presents, and prepare meals, all designed to foster connection and joy, and contrasted these efforts with the selective engagement and slighted interactions that had occurred, revealing the dynamics of influence at play. She adjusted a candle on the sideboard, its flame steady and unwavering, a small but symbolic affirmation of her own constancy and attention to detail. Clara allowed her thoughts to wander to Ethan's perspective, to the way he had hesitated, his small features reflecting the conflict of instinct and instruction, and she understood the subtle power of observation, of noting behavior without immediate reaction, preserving composure while gathering insight. The warmth from the fireplace enveloped her, mingling with the sense of the room and the soft sounds of the quiet household, providing a calm environment in which to reflect and plan. Each small action, each observation, became part of a mental map, a guide to understanding intent and character, and Clara felt a quiet reassurance that by remaining vigilant and composed, she would be prepared to respond thoughtfully to the ongoing dynamics, maintaining dignity and clarity while preserving the bonds she valued. She took another sip of her tea, the bitter warmth grounding her as she cataloged every detail of the interactions, every subtle movement, every pause and glance, forming a tapestry of understanding that would guide her in navigating the complex interpersonal landscape, ensuring that her awareness and measured response remained her greatest strengths in the unfolding moments to come. Clara Bennett sat by the frosted window, the soft glow of afternoon sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors and catching the edges of ornaments that sparkled with tiny reflections, and she observed the quiet movements of her household with a deliberate attentiveness. The holiday decorations, each placed with care, seemed to vibrate with memories of past celebrations, and she allowed herself a brief recollection of laughter and chatter that had once filled these rooms with warmth and comfort. She noticed the careful arrangement of Ethan's toys along the playroom rug, each one set as if waiting for his attention, and she considered how the small actions of adults around him could subtly shape his experience and understanding of family dynamics. Clara took a slow breath, the rich scent of cinnamon and pine from the decorated tree filling her senses, grounding her as she contemplated the interactions she had witnessed, the whispered instructions, the redirected affection, and the nuanced gestures that conveyed preference and control. She poured herself another cup of tea, the warmth in her hands a quiet reassurance, and allowed her eyes to drift over the kitchen table, noting the perfectly aligned plates, the mugs still steaming from the morning, and the crumbs from cookies left behind as markers of routine disrupted. Each detail contributed to her understanding, each observation a piece of a larger pattern that Clara had begun to trace with careful precision. She reflected on the ways that subtle guidance, a softly spoken word, or a gentle tug of the hand could influence not only the immediate behavior of a child, but also the broader atmosphere of family interactions, shaping expectations and emotional responses without overt confrontation. Clara considered how she had always approached holidays and gatherings with patience and thoughtfulness, investing effort into meals, decorations, and traditions that fostered warmth and connection, and yet, despite her careful preparation, she had observed deliberate shifts in attention and engagement that spoke to the strategic shaping of relationships. She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction in recognizing her own clarity and the acuity of her attention, a sense of quiet empowerment that came from understanding rather than reacting, from observing rather than confronting prematurely. The room was filled with the gentle crackle of the fireplace and the subtle hum of the heating system, sounds that formed a comforting backdrop to her reflections, and Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose as she cataloged each interaction, each gesture, each shift in expression, storing them in memory with deliberate care. She understood that her calm, her composure, and her awareness were tools as potent as any words or actions could be, and that by remaining observant, by maintaining her patience and her dignity, she could navigate the complex web of family interactions with intelligence and measured intent. Clara sipped her tea once more, the warmth anchoring her thoughts, and she allowed herself to envision the days ahead, noting that careful observation, thoughtful reflection, and quiet strength would be her guiding principles, ensuring that she remained both aware and resilient in the subtle negotiations of familial influence and connection. Clara Bennett sat in the quiet of the late afternoon, the soft light filtering through the frost-dusted windows and casting gentle patterns across the floor, and she allowed herself to simply observe, to let the details of the household reveal their truths. The ornaments on the tree glimmered faintly in the fading light, each one a marker of seasons past, and she noticed the subtle imperfections, the tiny chips and scratches that reminded her of years of care and attention given to her family traditions. Clara traced her fingers along the edge of the mantel, feeling the cool surface, and reflected on the small interactions she had witnessed earlier, the gentle guidance of Ethan by Vanessa, the quiet withdrawal of attention, the subtle cues meant to shape behavior without overt confrontation. She thought back to the mornings of wrapping gifts, the hours spent baking cookies and decorating the tree, and contrasted them with the gentle redirection of Ethan's affection, seeing in it a pattern of influence she had not fully appreciated until now. Clara sipped her tea, the warmth seeping into her hands and grounding her thoughts, and she considered how observation itself was a tool, how noting glances, gestures, and the timing of small phrases could reveal far more than direct words ever would. She moved slowly to the kitchen counter, straightening the mugs and adjusting the plates, each action deliberate, a quiet rehearsal of control and care, a way to maintain order amidst subtle tension. Clara reflected on the ways that influence had been exercised, small acts shaping decisions and behavior, and how patience and calm could counterbalance subtle manipulation without confrontation. She allowed her mind to catalog the interactions, each small shift of posture or glance, the way Ethan had hesitated when pulled aside, the soft inflection in Vanessa's voice, all forming a tapestry of intention that Clara now understood with clarity. The gentle hum of the heating system, the occasional flicker of light from the fire, the muted sound of the wind outside combined to create a calm environment for reflection, each element reinforcing the importance of awareness and quiet observation. Clara thought of the days ahead, of the gatherings to come, and how she could apply her understanding without disrupting the harmony outwardly, maintaining dignity while silently noting patterns, storing them for times when insight would provide the greatest advantage. She imagined the subtle ways she could influence outcomes through presence, through calm consistency, and through deliberate attention to detail, using patience as a quiet form of strength. Clara leaned back in her chair, letting the warmth of the tea and the comfort of the familiar surroundings anchor her, and she allowed herself a small, resolute smile, recognizing that knowledge and observation were as powerful as any action, and that in her measured attention, She held both clarity and quiet authority to navigate the complex dynamics of her family with foresight and composure. Clara Bennett moved through the living room as the evening light deepened, the shadows from the Christmas tree stretching across the floor and mingling with the warm glow of the fireplace. She paused by the window, observing the quiet snowfall outside, each flake drifting slowly, unique yet part of a larger, serene pattern, reminding her of the subtle rhythms within her household that often went unnoticed. She picked up the small plate of untouched cookies, feeling the smooth edges beneath her fingertips, and placed it neatly back on the counter, a simple act of order amidst the underlying tension she had been observing for hours. Clara reflected on the gentle guidance Vanessa had exerted over Ethan, the way his small gestures and hesitations revealed his awareness of the subtle hierarchy in the room, and she cataloged these observations with precision, noting the timing, tone, and body language with the care of someone assembling a detailed map. The quiet hum of the heating system and the soft crackle of the fire created a calm backdrop as Clara moved to straighten a stack of holiday cards on the side table, each envelope representing a connection, a memory, or a carefully maintained relationship, some of which had been tested in recent interactions. She allowed herself to revisit memories of past holidays, recalling the laughter, the shared stories, and the moments of connection that had once been effortless, contrasting them with the deliberate interruptions and subtle redirections she had witnessed, and noting how these small shifts revealed patterns of influence that were consistent yet understated. Clara sipped her tea slowly, the warmth grounding her as she considered the ways in which observation, patience, and subtle awareness could be as effective as any spoken word in understanding and navigating complex social dynamics. She glanced at the ornaments on the tree, their reflections fragmented across the room, and recognized the parallels between their careful placement and the careful structuring of attention and behavior within her family, understanding that every gesture, however minor, contributed to the unfolding narrative. Clara leaned back in her chair, allowing the quiet to settle around her, appreciating the clarity that came from calm reflection and careful attention to detail, knowing that her composed presence served both as a stabilizing force and as a lens through which the deeper currents of family dynamics could be understood. The soft glow of the lights, the faint scent of pine, and the steady rhythm of the evening created an environment in which she could fully absorb and integrate the observations she had made, preparing herself to respond with measured thoughtfulness and quiet authority in the days to come, ensuring that her influence, insight, and dignity remained intact while the subtle manipulations around her continued to unfold. Clara Bennett rested in her armchair, the soft glow of the fireplace illuminating the ornaments on the Christmas tree and casting gentle shadows across the floor, and she allowed herself a moment to absorb the quiet of the evening. The snow outside continued to fall in a delicate, unhurried rhythm, each flake unique yet part of a serene pattern, reflecting the slow, deliberate pace at which she had been observing her household and its subtle dynamics. Clara's gaze moved to the small pile of holiday cards on the side table, each envelope neatly stacked, a symbol of the connections she had maintained with care and thoughtfulness over the years, and she reflected on how attention to such details could reveal the intentions and priorities of those around her. She sipped her tea, the warmth spreading through her hands and settling in her chest, a comforting counterpoint to the faint tension that lingered in the spaces between interactions. Clara considered Ethan, the small gestures of hesitancy and trust she had noticed, and how they mirrored the broader patterns of influence and subtle control exercised by Vanessa, a reminder that awareness and patience were as powerful as direct action. She allowed her thoughts to drift to the preparation of the holiday, the meticulous arrangement of cookies, mugs, and decorations, and how these efforts contrasted with the interruptions and redirections that had subtly shifted attention and affection. Clara adjusted a candle on the mantel, aligning it perfectly with the others, and felt a quiet satisfaction in maintaining order in her environment as a reflection of the order she sought in understanding family dynamics. The soft hum of the heating system, the crackle of the fire, and the faint echo of distant wind created a calm atmosphere, a perfect setting for contemplation and planning. She noted the small details she had cataloged over the day, the timing of glances, the tone of softly spoken words, the positioning of individuals in the room, and how each of these elements revealed character and intention in ways that words alone could not. Clara's blue eyes scanned the tree, the gifts, and the play area where Ethan's toys rested, and she imagined how subtle awareness and quiet observation could shape her understanding of the family's interactions without disrupting the outward appearance of harmony. She felt a growing sense of resolve, a recognition that patience, careful attention, and composure were her tools, and that through them she could navigate and influence the household with insight and clarity. Clara sipped her tea once more, noting the interplay of light and shadow across the room, and allowed herself a measured smile, knowing that while she had observed, catalogued, and reflected, she had also preserved her dignity and authority. The evening deepened around her, the snow continuing to fall, the lights of the tree shimmering faintly, and Clara Bennett, serene yet vigilant, understood that the careful observation and calm precision she had practiced would guide her in the coming days, providing clarity, foresight, and the quiet strength to engage with her family on her own terms, fully aware and fully composed.